Hey guys, what's up? So the Genesis, a pretty underrated console, especially in JRPGs. And while it doesn't really have a strong library on that genre, unfortunately, especially when it comes to Japanese RPGs, it does have some pretty underrated ones. So, a few hidden gems. And I know if you're a Genesis enthusiast, or if you're a fan of that console and know a lot of it, you'll probably know almost every single title on this list. But remember, I'm making this video for those who are not really familiar with the Genesis and have stayed away over time from that console. So to bring them into this console, I'm making this video so they can see that there are indeed more JRPGs than just Phantasy Star or Shining Force. So let's begin! Number 10. Ys 3. Most people are familiar with the Super Nintendo version of this game, and even that one is something that I would consider a hidden gem. But the SNES not always has the better versions, I'm afraid. The playability of Ys 3 on the Genesis was something that I enjoyed more there, even though this game originally came out for PC consoles and then ported to the MSX2, then to TurboGrafx, Famicom, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, the PS2. Yep, this game has been everywhere, and it still hasn't gained that much recognition. It's an action RPG, obviously the third in the now popular Ys series, playing like a side-scroller that can be beaten in about 3 or 4 hours, so it's a very short RPG. A hidden gem that might stop being one anytime soon, hopefully, because it's actually pretty good. Number 9. Soleil, or Crusader of Senti, or... yeah. This changing names crap back in the day was extremely annoying. Once we found out about the real names of video games, most of us were pissed. Conversations between gamers from different parts of the world tend to be confusing thanks to all these stupid decisions the publishers made, all in the name of publicity. But anyways, Crusader of Senti, or whatever you wish to call it, as you can see, well, it's a Link to the Past clone, but with monsters fighting by your side, more dialogues, and therefore open to character development. Since some people, including me, don't consider Zelda as RPGs, and even in Wikipedia it says that this is just an action-adventure game, why don't you be the judge? I'm just here to recommend a game that I consider a hidden gem for the Genesis and thought it was pretty underrated. It might not be as good as A Link to the Past, and I do consider it as an RPG, but it's still decent enough to be on this list. Number 8. Sorcerer's Kingdom. This is a strategy RPG that was quite original for its time, considering the gameplay mechanics it has. While not having exactly a unique battle system, it is actually its rules that give it that little spark of interest. Everything looks very dull at the beginning. You go around by yourself in towns and then fight some monsters in battles that need to be done one-on-one, otherwise you'll probably die, which will happen often anyway for a while, until you get used to it. But once you get your allies, however, is when the real fun will start. Getting the gist of this game is the key to liking it, otherwise you might dump it after the first couple of hours. For every action you or your party members do, even moving, your enemies do the same, so it works sort of like a turn-based RPG at the same time, but only allowing you to move in 4 directions. If you want to give this game a chance, please bear in mind that its awkward battle system is actually the key to understanding this hidden gem. Number 7. Exile. Exile is yet another action RPG that belongs to a series called XCR, which is pronounced similarly. The first 2 games were for PC consoles at the end of the 80s, then the second one was ported to PC Engine and the Mega Drive, But it wasn't until Working Designs brought them to North America to the TurboGrafx and the Genesis that we finally met Exile. No Exile 2, no, just Exile. Well, as you saw, it plays first with an overview in towns and story, but when it comes to do battle, it turns into side-scrolling action. You play as this guy here, who's actually the protagonist of all the Exile games, with a battle system that's technically a hack-and-slash one. This game is good, but it might be too hard for beginners, especially since it kind of feels like as if you were playing a Ninja Gaiden game for the NES. But either way, it's pretty decent and a nice hidden gem. Number 6. Light Crusader. This one's probably one of the least hidden RPGs on the list, especially for fans of the Sega Genesis, but I thought I'd include it not only because it's very fun, but also because most people not exactly familiar with this console might have overlooked it. It's an action RPG with an isometric view, hack and slash system, lots of bosses, lots of puzzles, a generic story, cool music. It has everything you need to have fun for a while because the gameplay itself is what you should consider them if you want to play it. What's interesting also about this game is that it was released near the end of the Genesis lifespan, so it's officially the last JRPG published for it. It was made by Treasure, same people behind a lot of underrated classics such as Gunstar Heroes and the Sin and Punishment games. So check it out! Number 5. Uncharted Waters. It's a simulator and a role-playing game in which you take the role of a noble who works for the King of Portugal, and his goal is to sail, trade, fight pirates and other merchants in an ocean adventure. This is a classic that was originally released for the MSX and the NES in 1991, then ported the next year to the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. It's very fun to play, so definitely a hidden gem. And while not being that good at first, especially because nearly nobody was used or attracted to these kinds of games that much back then, its uniqueness caught a lot of people's attention, enough to make a sequel, an even better game, and a much successful RPG that was called New Horizons. So this excellent game, also known as Uncharted Waters 2, also released for the Super Nintendo, is totally an improved experience. In here, you can choose between 6 protagonists, each with their own storyline and gameplay. The interaction between the characters and their environment, including not only the sea battles in the form of a strategy RPG, but also the towns and the trading, opens deeply to character development in a much more solid and well-written story. It's more linear now, contrary to the first game, but much more fun to play. Either version is fine, the SNES or the Genesis one, so I'm gonna have to strongly recommend whichever, since the game itself is what really matters here. This game deserves more love and more attention, so please give it a try if you can. Number 3. Beyond Oasis, also known as the story of Thor. So here's another case of a game with 2 completely different names in Europe and America. So call it however you wish. The game itself, I must say, it's awesome! It might look very generic at first, especially since its role-playing elements are a little mediocre, but as you go on, you realize you've become addicted to it. It's an action RPG developed by Ancient, legendary company that also helped into creating Streets of Rage 2. So the funny thing here is that the battle system plays more like a beat 'em up than a hack and slash one, using combos to defeat your enemies, which is very fun to do actually. You can also use magic depending on the spirit that are helping you in your quest. It's a really fun game, not that hidden thankfully, but I obviously highly recommend it. Number 2. Landstalker. Perhaps the least hidden on this list, somewhat popular, especially since it has been said that it is the spiritual precursor of the Alondra games for the PS1. The reason this game's on the list, despite its little popularity, is because it's just too good. Some people have compared this to Zelda in the past, including me, but after playing it for hours and going further and further, I'd like to point out that it's very different. It's an action RPG with platforming elements, lots of puzzles, towns, characters, dialogues. In other words, a much more solid and developed story than in most Zelda games, therefore an RPG. Now, I'm not saying it's better than them, I'm just saying this game's pretty cool, and if you haven't played it, well, what are you waiting for then? It's the second place on the list, so in my opinion, it's obviously very, very good. Number 1. War Song. Also known as the first Land Racer game, only one of the series that was localized outside Japan back then at the early 90s, it's a strategy RPG developed by Careersoft, back then known as Team Career, the same people who have made the Growlancer games. The music in this game is extremely good. Truly, it has one of the most amazing soundtracks ever, so Genesis-like, that excites you every time you're playing this game. It's obviously hard, as you might have been expecting me to say, but it is very rewarding because you not only play as the main characters, but also as their small platoons that go into little skirmishes where geographic positions and RNG percentages always make the difference. You know, these skirmishes, they always remind me of the Suikoden games, curiously. But anyways, this game is no masterpiece, but it is by far the best on the list, and trust me, you're gonna love it. That is, if you're a fan of strategy RPGs. So now you know, guys, give the Genesis a chance. It does have some pretty good JRPGs, not as many as the PlayStation or the Nintendo consoles, but it hung in there while it lasted. Thank you guys for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!